All right, welcome back to another episode of Blown Coverage. I'm Mike Bell with my co-host Caleb Schwer. Caleb, it was another great week of college football, and for this week, it was a big week for both our teams. And we have a lot to get to, a lot of storylines. I feel like there was a lot of separation this week. You started to see within the SEC, Big Ten, and we're going to get to all that, ACC as well. But we cover all the teams, and this isn't just an A&M Texas show, and we've been pretty good about that. However, I feel like two of the biggest storylines this week are going to come from the Texas game and the A&M game. So let's just start there. I know we're both probably going to have a decent amount to say about both those games. Let's start with the Texas game. I know that's your team. What happened? How'd you pull it off, and how do you feel about Texas at this point?
Well, like you said a few minutes ago, the both of our teams had pretty big weekends for different reasons. I feel like, y'all went out there, and regardless of how you feel about LSU, they still have some playmakers. They just haven't shown up at the right time, but you guys went out there and dominated them. Texas, however, uh, listen, I don't think Mississippi State's a bad team by any means, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, Texas has the players to go compete and definitely beat them for sure. And for a long time, it looked like we weren't going to do that. I mean, I was one or two drives away from probably going to like grilled chicken and kind of prepare for the LSU Texas A&M game. And then we started like a huge comeback. 24 points in the fourth quarter. The last time we did something like that was, I want to say like maybe 2018 or 2019, and I forgot who it was against. But um, throughout that game, though, I really thought it was like the definition of a culture win because it was just like the previous week, sloppy, ugly, but we got it done. And it's frustrating that we have been in those situations the past couple weeks, for sure. But at the same time, though, like when it's a time crunch and time matters, we have been playing like some of our best football games or our best football during that time period. And I guess you could say like that's somewhat reassuring because honestly, I think it's just like within a matter of time before Arch kind of gets a little bit more consistent, given that there is at least some improvement with the offensive line. So once those things kind of start firing on all the cylinders, like and just slight improvements are made, I feel like we'll be a decent team. I don't know how decent, like as far as going into the playoffs or whatever, but well, and it all hinges on how the offensive line plays. Because listen, we were talking earlier, so literally Mississippi State is 2 plays away from being 6-1 going into this game. Really, the only game that they have lost, like by a big amount, pretty much. Let me see actually who it was. I just forgot off the top of my head. I almost want to say you guys,
It
but
was probably us, 31
yeah,
9.
yeah, 31-9. Okay, that's what I was thinking. So anyway, I mean, they in Florida. I know it's the record doesn't necessarily show it. I do think they have some good players, and if they show up, they can beat anybody. And then the Tennessee game, final over or it was an overtime game. They just didn't get the touchdown on the last play of the game. So, in other words, it was a great culture win just because it was very sloppy. And how easy would it have been for us to have given up in that game with being down 24 points going into the fourth quarter? I mean, it would have been very easy in the old Texas, like before Sark's tenure, we would have just given up and it would have been chalked up as an L right then and there. Especially being at Mississippi State. I know that's not necessarily maybe one of the top stadiums to play in the SEC by any means, but it wasn't necessarily a easy crowd to go play in, especially in that moment. So, does my heart wish that the game didn't end, like go the way it did? Sure, but I'm glad that we were able to go in there, be clutch, pull it out. Arch had a really good game. Um, I'm kind of I'm curious to see like how long he's going to be out because on that last play or the second to last play before Matthew Caldwell came in there, scored that really clutch touchdown to CJ Mosley. He left the game, and it turns out he had a concussion. So we'll see how that could be an important thing, especially going into this week because we got Vandy at home. Thankfully, I think this is our first game in like 4 weeks or something like that. Which, I mean, that does take a toll if you're going to an away game every single week for a month. So I think it was a I think it was a good overall win. Defense, man, there's definitely some stuff to work on for sure, especially in the passing game. I think some of that is just attributed to just some youth because we do have some youth in the secondary, and especially Michael Taff was out, which is like basically a quarterback of our defense. He was out, and he's going to be out for the next couple of games, unfortunately. Um, I think the young people that like filled in those positions filled in quite well, and then Grayson Littleton. Um, he's a true freshman. He's been playing pretty solid for a true freshman all year. It's just, Jeff Levy's got really good offensive scheme. Blake Shapen is a very tenured quarterback. I think he's in his fifth year. And he actually won Baylor the Big 12 championship whenever it was Dave Aranda, I think that was his name, in 2021. So, I mean, Blake Shapen, I think he's a decent quarterback too. And a little concerning thing was at times our defense was also kind of giving up some big time runs to their running back, and that's definitely a strength of the defense. So anyway, I'm curious to see how we will stack up against Vandy this upcoming week. But I guess I went over that, but or went over pretty much everything. What were your initial thoughts? I guess just from the perspective of an unbiased A&M fan.
Well, there are two sides to every game. There's the winning side and the losing side. And look, at the end of the day, Texas won the game. And you're right. They could have quit. They could have quit. And I know you said that you were close to just basically turning off the game. I was close to turning off the game and being like, okay, let's see what else there is to watch. And you have to think the players, they may never admit it publicly, but that there were plenty of players on the sideline that said, yeah, this one's gotten away. But to their credit, they remained in there and kept going. So that's the winning side of it. And Texas deserves credit for that. They pulled it off, they won. But you also have to give plenty of criticism to Mississippi State for allowing Texas to come back and win because Mississippi State, their mistake was realizing that they did have the game won. They really did. They were up, what was it, three scores? What was the score? 31-17 or something like that?
31-14.
31-14. They had the game won, but you're not allowed to play like that. And I give,
Yeah, they
I
left
mean,
their
the
foot off the
team,
brake or off the gas.
yes, and the team deserves plenty of criticism, but so does the coach. And you said it, they're a few plays away from having a much better record. And there was a decision, I don't know exactly at what point in the game. I know it was like later in the game. I think it was the fourth quarter. But, Texas at this point was not moving the ball well at all. And I think this really changed the game is when Mississippi State like went for it at midfield. Like
Mhm.
just punt the ball. Texas hasn't moved the ball all game. And then I think once Texas got back to within 10, Mississippi State just kind of didn't know what to do with themselves. It kind of reminded me of what Ole Miss did last week against Georgia. Like
Yeah,
they just started to feel the comeback happening, and they played more so not to lose rather than to win. And it was just too passive from on both sides of the ball because they were getting after Arch all game long. Every Texas game to me, including this one, really, other than the last like 7 minutes of the game, every Texas game has looked the same. Like every game, it's that Arch doesn't have time to throw, and when he does
yeah,
throw, it can be decent. Wingo always has some great catches, and then he throws like an interception that's bad. whether that's his fault or the pressure. And
Yeah,
then the defense is pretty good, but then they'll allow us to pass. But like it's honestly the same game every time.
it
But
is.
what Mississippi State did is they just started to play really soft in coverage. They stopped rushing the way they were rushing, and then on offense, I'm looking right now. Blake Shapen threw for 381 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. They were doing really well, and they kind of just shut that down and went one dimensional against a really good Texas defense against the run. So it was just bad. Bad teams don't know how to finish games. And that's why Mississippi State is 0-4 in the SEC. That's why they're 4-4. That's why they're not a great team. Should they be better? Sure. But they're not. And
I think they're on
this,
the verge of kind of moving up,
yeah, yes. Yes,
like
but I mean,
next
moving
year.
up to where? Moving from the very bottom to like a mid tier. Okay, that's where they're at. They're not from the mid
I'm
tier.
not saying like, oh, give us more. I'm just saying like
I
trying to be
understand what you're saying.
unbiased in there. Yeah,
That's not well, but yes, Mississippi State though. Look, they've been at the bottom of the league for however many years, and they're at the bottom of the league now. They're 0-4 in the SEC. So I've watched them play. I've seen them nearly beat all these teams. But you know who also has nearly beat all these teams? Arkansas, Auburn. They're at the bottom of the SEC. There's a reason they're not at the top. So yeah, so you give credit where credit is due. The guy I continue to be impressed most with on Texas is probably Wingo. I mean, he had 184 yards, and the guy you did not mention
Anthony
is
Hill.
no Nimblet. How he keeps
Oh
really.
yeah,
I
he's
mean, we can talk
fantastic.
about Mississippi State and all this stuff, and how they were playing soft coverage, or how Texas arched through the ball well. Just like last week, the guy that really saved you guys, and maybe it's not just one guy; it's the entire unit, but the special teams.
Yeah.
Those big returns really have won you guys both those games,
Oh, for sure.
and that so
And that's
that's
another example of just the. So I think it was a display of like two different cultures, right? And I think for the most part, I don't want to say like Jeff Levy doesn't have like a good culture yet, but this is just a second year, so it's kind of young. It's kind of hard to have that like championship mindset in his second year, especially with I think they brought in 70 players this year alone, so that's extremely hard to just build a culture like that. But like you said, they took the brakes off, and there's always that debate on if a team is that far ahead in the fourth quarter. Do you take the brakes off, or do you take the gas off, or and put the brakes on, try to control the clock, or you just keep going? And I think last night kind of answered that. In some circumstances, you got to just keep the foot on the gas and keep going. And if they did that, they probably very well could have beaten us. Um, I mean, other players like that, I would like to. Yes, Ryan Niblett has come up like extremely clutch for us in this special teams unit. I mean, it was a complete all around team win. Um, I mean, like a couple of other players, CJ Mosley had two really good touchdown catches. Anthony Hill, I mean, the dude is just a beast. He's going to be a first round linebacker. And, I almost selfishly would want the Cowboys to take him because we suck at linebacker. And, he's an absolute beast. Colin Simmons, too. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say. Exciting upcoming week, Vandy. I think that'll be a good test too to kind of see like where mentally our team is. Just the only question I have is I think we can go in there and compete as long as we have Arch. I don't really know too much about what this backup quarterback can do, Matthew Caldwell-Forest, although I do want to kind of shout him out too because that's an extremely tough situation to go into. And he just, I won't say it was a perfect lob to the corner, but it was good enough to get us that touchdown. So anyway,
I do wonder, if he performs well and he ends up starting, if there's going to be any sort of like controversy there. I mean, there already has been a lot of call from Texas fans and other fans like, "Hey, bench Arch," even though I think we've talked about it, that's unfair because of the O line. But if he does go out and perform well, you know that there's just going to be a little bit of pressure there. In
so
terms,
and for reference, I think the best offensive line play that we have seen was, or this year. I mean, I guess it could maybe be a little. a little bit of an argument like the second half of the OU game in the fourth quarter in this game, the Mississippi State game. Arch was like dunking and throwing the ball everywhere, like zipping it in there. Did he have a couple like off throws? Yes, and then actually some wide receivers dropped the ball too. But if you give Arch time, he's actually really good. It's just he rarely has enough time. So anyway,
Well, while we're still talking about Texas, obviously the news that came out right before the
oh
game
yeah, that
was
was yeah.
Steve Sarkisian potentially being linked to the Titans job. I always wonder when I see that, is that the Titans putting that out there to gauge his interest, or the other way around? Is Sarkisian putting that out there to gauge their interest to say, "Hey, I might be interested"? Don't know. What are your thoughts just on that situation?
Well, I hope that I personally hope that doesn't happen. But I thought this person, like on a halftime show, said something very interesting, and you know, maybe agree with it. He was saying how for it to come out this early in the season, there may be some smoke to the fire because what other like how else would this come about? But then again, there are some pretty shady media individuals that just want you know, to get credit for the story or something like that. So there's always some shady people, but yeah. And then like actually in his press conference last night, I don't know if you saw this or not, but he was like, "Yeah, let me address it because it really pisses me off." And because like one person could just say one thing and then the whole entire media goes to flames with it, which is so true. I mean, sometimes the media is just so bad, but anyway.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. That would be very, I mean, what's happening in coaching is pretty amazing. These jobs that are opening up, who's being linked to where. Lane Kiffin obviously is kind of like maybe the top name right now. We'll get to him probably a little bit later, but it would be interesting to see, if that job opens up for Texas, if LSU opens up, it could just be like a crazy coaching carousel this year. But speaking of LSU, we have to get to this next game, and of course, I'm very excited to talk about it. A&M beats LSU 49-25, and yeah, what can I say? This was one of the top games of all time for me as a fan to watch. We had Notre Dame earlier in the year, and that was great. But I would say this was the game for me. I've been hard on A&M all year, but now I would say, okay, this A&M team is legitimately a great team. How great? I don't know, but for them to do what they did in Death Valley, they were 20-1 even under Brian Kelly in these night games, and A&M had not won there since 1994. I mean, you have to give major credit to A&M. And like I was saying with the last game, there are two sides to all of it. And what's sad about this game to me is there will be a lot of people, maybe even more people, talking about the LSU side and what happens with Brian Kelly than the other side of giving A&M credit. I think you'll get both. Don't get me wrong, but listen, just absolutely amazing. The star of the game to me was KC Concepcion and what he was able to do both as a receiver and as a punt returner. And to do what A&M did in the second half, I think they outscored them. What was it, 25-0 in the second half? I'd have to go back and see. I guess I can look right now. In that third quarter, it was okay. 21 points they scored. It was 35-0 run in the second half. And Marcel Reed, he was dynamic. He kind of did Marcel Reed things where A&M could have gone up 21-9 in the second quarter, and honestly, that kind of looked like classic A&M at first. Like, okay, like you can tell A&M is the better team, but they just give points away. Bad penalties, allowing a punt block for a safety, and then just stupid interceptions. I mean, we're in the end zone. Why don't we just run the ball? We're doing passes. Marcel Reed is not the most flawless quarterback ever. He's dynamic, but he can make mistakes like that. And somehow we were down in the first half, played as bad of a second quarter as we could have, but how we responded in the second half was maybe one of the best things I've seen from A&M since joining the SEC. Again, LSU was a team fighting like for their season. And that is the one thing about A&M in their schedule. All season, they've had to face teams coming off losses. By the way, our next game is going to be at Missouri. Missouri coming off a loss, needing to win to save their season. Notre Dame to start this whole run. They were coming off a loss of Miami, and they really didn't want to start out off 0-2. Same thing for Auburn. They needed the win. Mississippi State, if they wanted to make anything of their season, they're coming off the loss to Tennessee. Florida coming off the win to Texas. They got to run the table. We beat Florida, and then now LSU. How good are all those teams? I think Notre Dame's pretty good. They're all good. I wouldn't say any of them are elite other than Notre Dame, but all very tough spots. And A&M, complete win offensively, special teams, defense, 7 sacks. And yeah, I'm so happy for A&M. Now I feel like truly deserving of that number 3 ranking. We're probably going to have a good chance to run the table. The tough games left are at Missouri and at Texas, and that will be a challenge of its own. But it pretty much locks up a playoff spot. I hate to say locks up because so many things could happen, but here's the deal. I mean, it would have to be a disaster for A&M not to get in the playoffs. It is actually a harder road to get in the SEC championship game than to get in the playoffs at this point. Because if we lose one, the way the tiebreakers work out, we basically aren't going to be in the championship. So, but honestly, whatever. And by the way, side topic, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but they really may need to figure something out with the way they're doing seeding, bracketing again, because it's weird to say. I would almost rather, I want A&M to win the SEC, don't get me wrong, but I'd almost rather them not make the championship and get to host a playoff game. Because that to me is like a bigger deal, like to see a home game at Kyle Field versus a the home field advantage in college football is so much more than say in the NFL. There's a good chance that we're not going to see a visiting team go into any of these big stadiums and win in the playoffs because the home field advantage in college is just so big. So I'd almost rather see that. But don't get me wrong, I'd want A&M to go and try to compete for the SEC championship. But it's just amazing what Elko's doing. He's, to go into LSU to get our first our first time being 8-0 since 1992. It doesn't look like 8-4 is going to happen, which is what a lot of people have said. Oh, A&M's always 8-4, and that's been true. Just the job by Elko has truly been amazing. A&M not flawless, and then the other side of the coin, away from A&M, LSU. I would have told you if LSU. I had this all thought up in the second quarter. If LSU would have found a way to win that game, I would have sat here and told you that I am not impressed by LSU because I watched them in that first half and like they're just not that good, really on either side of the ball. Like they're not horrible, but like they can't block well. Nussmeyer is maybe okay. Maybe he just doesn't have enough time. Maybe he's injured. They can't run the ball that well. They, defensively they have problems. Like they've been thought of as this kind of like elite defense. I don't know. I don't really see it. They're good. I don't know if they're an elite defense. They had no sacks in this game. By the way, A&M had what was it, 7 sacks? So, or maybe sorry, 6 sacks. And yeah, so just a complete performance by A&M. Where does LSU go from here coaching? I don't think they're going to fire Brian Kelly, but I do think LSU is looking at a 7-5 season. They're about to face Alabama next at Alabama. Just don't think they're winning that one. And who else do they have? They have OU, and who else do they have here?
Miller.
Uh, I'll look, but oh, they
Uh,
have okay. OU's the
they
only
play
game.
Arkansas too.
Yeah,
And
yeah, Arkansas. They're probably at best going to be 8-4, but at worst probably like 7-5, maybe 6-6, 6-6, which for LSU
what?
standards is unacceptable.
Wouldn't that be insane?
It would be. It's crazy after that week one at Clemson how far this team has fallen. It just shows Clemson just wasn't that good, obviously, but
Yeah,
but I would just say
got up to number 3. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I would just say the LSU fans expect so much, and I get it. You should expect more than what they're getting right now. I don't think they're going to get rid of Brian Kelly, but they're now thinking about it. To lose at home like that and to see the stadium empty the way that it did, that's not going to sit well with the boosters, the alumni,
That's
all
one of
those
the best fan bases, if not the best fan base in the country.
yeah, and their fans hate Kelly. And last thing I'll say on this is it does have the feel of even if Brian Kelly is a good coach, it really just reeks of him not fitting there. Like just even
Uh-huh.
watching him on the sidelines, his demeanor, just the way he walks, which is a weird thing to say. Like he's not LSU. He's just not. So it's hard to imagine him really turning things around. The whole thing's just weird, but that's kind of my thoughts. What do you got for me?
I think you said everything and then some on that. So, um, is this Brian Kelly's third year at LSU? I can't. I
Fourth.
don't. Fourth. Okay. So I always try to give coaches grace, like within the first two seasons, maybe even three, just depending on what school it is, what circumstances, whatever. But a school like LSU, by the fourth season, you pretty much kind of see what you're going to get out of that coach, and especially like just the amount of boosters, the amount of players that he has access to. I mean, LSU's man probably a top five job, and whenever LSU hired him initially, I was like, dang, that would actually be a really good hire for LSU, and I'm just very shocked. And I don't know if you saw his press conference last night after the game, but he was like, yeah, basically saying he does not blame the LSU fan base for being pissed at him and being disappointed. And I feel like once the press conferences you start saying that kind of stuff, I feel like it kind of goes downhill from there. Um, LSU would be an interesting team to kind of do a deep dive on, just because I haven't studied them, so it's just kind of like not necessarily surface level per se, but I like just taking a deep dive. Okay, like what's really going on here? Where how old are the people playing? That kind of thing. I don't know, but so like you said, on one flip of the coin, I think it is a good win for A&M. Just because playing there at night and like you said, their first win since 1992 or whatever, and you guys are 8-0. On the flip side of the coin, I mean, this LSU, how good are they or how bad are they? I guess is still a question. So that's kind of where I would leave it at. I think y'all's best win on the season, like by far, is Notre Dame. I don't know if I would put the A&M game over this game or not. Or sorry, the Arkansas game over this or not. Because I guess at least Arkansas, they have been somewhat consistent as far as like being really good on offense and really poor on defense. Whereas LSU, you have no idea what you're going to get out of them. But yeah, I mean, anyway, that's really all I have to say about it, to be honest.
Okay. Well, um, I guess the LSU job opening up, and we kind of talked about Texas. If there's something happening, maybe we should transition now into the OU Ole Miss game. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around Lane Kiffin.
Potentially both. Well, more so Lane Kiffin than Brent Venables, but there for a little bit, people were questioning Brent Venables and his safety at OU too.
I think, yeah, I don't really see anything happening there, at least not this year. They just
I
need to
don't think
figure,
it should happen. I don't think it should
yeah,
happen.
I mean, they
I'm
just need to
sorry.
figure out the offense there. But yeah, let's talk about this game. I thought this was one of the better, well, I say one of the better games of the day, but I tell you, this was, in my opinion, I want to say it's not as close as the score indicated, but maybe I should say it shouldn't have been as close as the score indicated because it felt like Ole Miss on really both sides of the ball was doing really well. And honestly, I don't know if Lane Kiffin already thinks he's coaching for Florida, but it was almost like he was like sabotaging Ole Miss. He was kind of doing like stupid, kind of like the Mississippi State thing, where going forward in weird spots when OU wasn't moving the ball well, putting in Simmons, the backup quarterback, used to be starting quarterback, in at the goal line after Chambliss had been doing really well, costing him a score there. And yeah, I thought this was, as we've talked about this week, there were separation games, and this was one of them. Ole Miss kind of needed a win like this, and but to me, like I, I think I think you can say both. Like this was a great win for Ole Miss, but also OU kind of exposed themselves as being frauds. I really think that. I think they're kind of frauds because I talked about it going into the week. 213 yards per game allowed on defense, but they hadn't faced a good offense yet. They faced Texas, Auburn, and somebody else. South
Michigan.
Carolina. Yeah, Michigan. And that was early in the season for Michigan.
Yeah,
Freshman. So,
and heavily relies on the run. So not
right.
necessarily one dimensional, but
Right. So I was curious to see this matchup. And Ole Miss offensively just did whatever they wanted. I mean, credit to that offense. I mean, it is very, very good. I think they can just score. They can score on just about anybody. And yeah, OU, the thing is, if their defense can't keep them in the game, their offense has serious issues. I mean, Mateer is good, but that's a limited offense. They're pretty one dimensional. They don't run the ball that well outside of Mateer. And yeah,
that's with going against Ole Miss's defense, which is suspect.
right. Right. That was the thing last week that Georgia took advantage of is they could run the ball very good against Ole Miss's front seven, but OU just couldn't get it done. So to me, OU's kind of done. Their schedule's still brutal going forward. Tennessee this week. They still have Alabama, uh, LSU. So yeah, it's tough for OU from here. But anyway, any more thoughts on this game?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know. Well, okay. I guess if you're saying frauds from the standpoint that OU is like a top five team or whatever, then yes, they're not probably a top five like college championship contender for sure because their defense is basically what holds the glue together for them. My only question is, what defense could really hold up against Ole Miss's offense at this point? Just because Ole Miss's offense has done really well, Chambliss is like every week the guy is good. It's really the only question I have for Ole Miss is like, when can they just make their defense? I think the only thing that is holding Ole Miss back this year from like going really far in the playoffs, and they still could, but just their defense, right? Like basically, it's just gonna be an offensive thing. Score 35, 40 points, you have a good chance of winning, but you don't ever want to have to like put your offense in that situation, of course, because most of the teams that are in the playoff at that point will have really good defenses because defense travels, defense wins you championships. Um, anyway, but I mean, it was a good win because it was at Norman, Oklahoma, too, which Norman can get really loud too, depending on the game. So that was a good win, especially with I think like all the noise around Lane Kiffin this week and the Florida and stuff like that. You know, that could have been an easy distraction to kind of derail the team, the focus, and everything like that. Because man, I feel like not like this is particular with Ole Miss, but Lane Kiffin, I think, has like kind of made this like a turned Ole Miss like completely around from the Hugh Freeze debacle that happened, almost 10 years ago now or whatever. If he leaves, man, a majority of their talent will be leaving as well. So, anyway,
It'll be the probably end of Ole Miss for a while.
oh, yeah, until they get like a younger coach that's trying to prove himself, that's actually really good, or somebody else is more tenured and they've lost a little bit and they have like a chip on their shoulder and it's like a prove it job kind of thing. But
Yeah. Well, by contender for Oklahoma, I meant playoff contender, and I don't think they're that. I don't mean top five. I mean like top 15. I don't think they're that. I think they're going to continue to lose. I think this is a team that they're 6-2 now, and the moment they started facing good teams, look, the Michigan wins looking better and better. Give them credit, but they lost to Texas. They've lost to Ole Miss now. They're about to. I mean, they've got Tennessee. We'll see where that goes, but that's at Tennessee.
And then
and
at Alabama too,
at
man.
Alabama. So I just think
I'd say after those three games, that'll be the telltale sign to see like how their defense really is. Just because Tennessee, I mean, no question, great offense. Alabama, I think they're also a great offense. It's just two two different kinds of offenses too. I put
well,
Tennessee. Go ahead.
what I was just gonna say, it's not just their defense, but like their offense. Like, so if
Yeah,
their
they're
defense can
yeah
even be like next level elite, I'm talking like top three in the nation. Their
yeah.
offense is just so limited. It's just not a good offense. So,
Well, it is. I mean, it really is. Just because they have to. Just and I said this like 2 weeks ago, but just the amount they have to use John Mateer in the run game, and he's coming off that surgery on his throwing arm
yep.
or throwing hand, excuse me, uh, which is something you don't really hear people doing, So it kind of shows you that they're extremely desperate to have that. And I mean, if they could figure something out, then hey, by all means, OU. I mean, here's their last four games, which we kind of already said, but at Tennessee, at Alabama, and then versus Missouri. Um, I think Tennessee like is I don't know, maybe a toss up potentially, but then again, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say who will win the game. I don't think OU matches up well against them. I think Alabama kind of I don't think the OU kind of stands a chance, to be honest, with Alabama. Missouri, they may match up a little bit better there, especially because we don't know how Missouri's quarterback is going to do since their starting quarterback. I know we'll get to this in a moment, but Missouri's starting quarterback out and had to put a true freshman in there this week against Vanderbilt. So we'll kind of see. Depending on how these last four games go for Brent Venables, I think it'd speak a little bit of a credit to him. Just the question is like, man, you pretty much have every resource you could ever want. Like, go get some more offensive guys. It's never the defense that's the issue. It's always the offense. And the only year that he was really successful, honestly, was when he had Jeff Lebby as his offensive coordinator and Dylan Gabriel, who was there for 1 year, had great success, left to go to Oregon and did pretty well with them because he thought Jackson Arnold was better than Dylan Gabriel, or maybe not better, but he just needed to do that so he wouldn't have lost him. And anyway, he ended up losing him anyway. So anyway, that's really all I have to say about that. Good. I think it was a really good win for Ole Miss, though, for sure.
Well, Ole Miss, I think, is in an interesting position now to. I think I saw, according to the tiebreakers, they'd have a really hard time making the SEC championship. But looking at the remaining schedule, they host South Carolina, then they have basically an FCS school, host Florida, which you never know about that game, and then at Mississippi State, rivalry game, you never know. Point being, Ole Miss has a very good chance to win out. And they're the type of team that could really make a run in the playoff. And by the way, host a playoff game if they only have the one loss. They're a dangerous team. I would watch out. But the reason I wanted to bring that up wasn't so much just that Ole Miss is a dangerous team. They are, but that kind of complicates things for Lane Kiffin as far as like the coaching stuff. Because Florida, or if LSU opens up, or if anywhere else wants Lane Kiffin, they will want him to commit to that job as soon as possible, or they'll hire somebody else. I mean, that's the way these things
Yep.
are working. They're not waiting anymore. Like, they want the hire done before the season's like over. So, a couple questions for you. I know you're not exactly in the know on this, but do you think Lane Kiffin is going to leave? What do you think is going to happen there?
Honestly, both of us need to watch that documentary that just came out with Lane Kiffin. I honestly would be very surprised just because, like, especially with his history, he left the Tennessee job to go coach at USC. And he's always brought that up kind of about how that was a mistake because he had it so good at Tennessee. And, which that USC or he had it so good at Tennessee, but he went to USC. And that's where his dad had coached for a long time. And that's kind of where he was raised, so to speak in the coaching realm, and so he wanted to go back there, and I don't necessarily blame him, but I think he's just at a good point in his life, and I think his daughter goes to school there, and I think what he's done with Ole Miss is like really good, and sometimes the grass isn't always greener, especially like because he could go to Florida, yes, but you never know what's going to happen. At least here, you have like a track record to say, okay, here's what he's done. He's actually a really good coach. So I'd be surprised if he left.
I slightly disagree. I would not be surprised if he left. My prediction will be that he does leave. I think it'll either be Florida or LSU. I don't really think there's any other spot that he'd be interested in. I think he'd be less interested in the Penn State job. But
Oh yeah, I think if he were to leave, it'd have to be for another SEC job. I don't think he would go to a different conference.
yeah, and again, that Steve Spurrier thing I brought up last week, I think that's kind of a big deal to him. And then, look, Florida is just a better job than Ole Miss. The only thing Ole Miss has is that he's already there. He kind of already has things set up. But especially if the LSU job opens, I do think he's gone. We'll see, but that's just my prediction. So, okay, let's move on now.
Do you think that would be a wise choice or not?
I do think it would be a wise choice. I think he's done everything he's can do at Ole Miss. Look, I mean, the season he's having this year is spectacular, but I imagine there's also something about like legacy. You could probably have a better legacy if you go turn it around at Florida or LSU, and it's just got to be a little bit easier to probably do what he wants to do in terms of like recruiting and things like that, having the fan base support that you just don't have at the Ole Misses. The only way I think he should stay at Ole Miss is just if he's like really, really happy there. Then it's like, okay, well then fine. But he's still, a relatively young guy. And I just think Florida, LSU, those are better jobs. So
Yeah, that's another interesting thing too, because even because listen, I would give the notch to LSU over Florida in a heartbeat, though. To be honest with you, um, if both of the schools come calling at him, I think it'd be very hard for him to say no to because I kind of forgot about LSU, but it's like, dang, okay, there's definitely a clear distinction in where LSU's at and the resources they have, and Ole Miss. I think it's a little bit closer than people want to give it credit for with Ole Miss and Florida. Okay, Florida might have some bigger money, but I don't know. I just don't see as much of a separation there as some people claim. But with LSU, I definitely think it's there. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see for sure. But yes, you guys are at top, and then Ole Miss is next, I guess, or is the next team in the SEC. And I would have to like who. Okay, I was going to ask you. I was going to say which out of the two of you has a better chance of going undefeated, but really, Ole Miss does not necessarily have a difficult schedule at all. So let me
yeah,
preface that to say, like, okay, I think Ole Miss does just because their schedule is really not that hard. So anyway,
yeah, I agree. Okay, well, let's move on. So let's see. So the next game I wanted to go to was Missouri Vanderbilt. Was that taking place at the same time as the Texas
it
game,
was
or was
unfortunately it
it
was.
was? Okay, okay. So I don't know how much of this you got to see. It was a more of a defensive battle than I think people imagined. One of the big storylines to come out of this, obviously, is that Pribula got hurt, and that is a loss for them. I will tell you, look, he's been good. I don't want to say he's been bad. He's kind of got that dual threat ability. But looking at the stats, this is, by the way, going into the fourth quarter of the game when he got injured. He was 9 for 14 for 68 yards passing. On the ground, he had 4 carries for 10 yards. So I mean, give Vandy credit for that too, sure. But this other guy came in, went 14 for 23, 138 yards, and one touchdown. So, I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know how serious the injury is. But this next guy, he might be better than Bull Pabula. Very small sample size. I'm just telling you, and I said it coming into the week that I trusted Pavia more. And I think ultimately that's probably what this game came down to is, Pavia didn't really make any big mistakes. He did have the one interception. He had the phenomenal play that was called back. I know you were mentioning to me earlier. But to be honest, this isn't a game too much about the quarterbacks uh, or even the running backs, although Hardy did have a good game there, Missouri's running back. This was about the defenses, and both defenses look very stout. And I was wondering that just because from a matchup perspective, Missouri's run D has been so good that proved to be pretty legit. And Vanderbilt's run D was also not bad. So pretty big for Vandy to get this win, being that they hosted game day. They're coming off a big win to LSU, no letdown performance. They've got Texas next week, and that's going to be interesting to see what they can do with that kind of spotlight. And then I don't know if you caught this, you probably saw the replay, but the Hail Mary at the end of the game,
Oh,
uh,
from Missouri.
yeah, they nearly came down with it. In fact, he did come down with it. It was just at the 1 inch line. So quite the
I did
way to
not
lose.
know that actually. Holy crap!
Yes. Yeah. No, no. They
Jeez.
threw it and the guy caught it. And they went to review. This is as time expired. So they made both sidelines wait
Where was Missouri at though when they threw that?
like the 50-yard line, 45,
Oh,
mid 50.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. For some reason, I was thinking like they were at their goal line. They threw a Hail
No,
Mary and it got to the. I was about to say, "Holy crap!"
no, no. But no. So he was 1 inch away from potentially tying this game. It doesn't happen. And now that I think about it, I guess that slightly skews the stats a little bit in terms of this new quarterback's yards, but not much. He was still decent. But yeah, credit to Vandy, what they've been able to do. Truly, top 10 team, great story. And yeah, those are just kind of my general thoughts. Missouri, they've got a bye week now, and then they've got A&M.
Which
And
can be
yeah,
interesting. I think so. The kind of season that Vanderbilt's having, I think, is magical. I think they're definitely, there's still some of that like sparkle, like they're a Cinderella team. Kind of like Nick Saban was discussing last week. Like it's just hard to think of them in that way. So I hate to say Cinderella team, but they do have some sparkle about them because it's just like you're still not used to them yet being this good, and but they are. I think it was just an impressive defensive game for the most part, and I think it's hard to contain Pavia any week, And the only time he's really been contained, I guess you could argue, is this week in the Alabama game. So credit to Missouri's defense, and also I would like to. I can never pronounce this guy's name, Drinkowitz or whatever, Missouri's
mhm.
head coach. Honestly, the guy, what he's been able to do at Missouri is pretty good. Missouri is just like they have had a couple fluke years, but under Drinkowitz, I think he's done a really good job with them. And considering, like you were saying earlier, Probola or however you pronounce his name, is he an okay quarterback? Sure, but is he going to be a quarterback that propels your team? No. So I think for the large part, it's definitely the play calling that Drinkowitz has in his arsenal. That I think he's a better offensive mind than what people would want to expect or give him credit for. Excuse me. And so, just would like to give Missouri a little shout out in that sense, just because I don't want to necessarily say like, oh, Vanderbilt's going to go and win the SEC championship, but Missouri still hung around there and playing not necessarily a half without their quarterback, but close to it in a sense, and you got to give that freshman, like you said, credit because that's a hard situation to go into too. Very emotional game, home game at Vanderbilt, which is that a hard stadium to play in compared to others? No, but Vanderbilt right now is just one of those teams where it's going to be hard to beat just because number one, the team's mentality, but also just like they have the belief that they can go out there and do that. So, like you said, and I think it could be very interesting for Texas because they're coming back they're coming to Austin, the first home game we've had in several weeks. I think we match up good enough with them because our run defense is. I know we were a little leaky this game, but throughout the season, that has been the strength of our defense. The past game, which is not necessarily Vanderbilt's bread and butter. They can definitely Pavia can throw it. I'm not saying you can't, but they really like to use the run to set up the pass more so. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that game will go. I think it was a great game, and I'm glad that game day went there just because I don't know when the last time game day went to went to Vanderbilt.
I think it was only one other time, and I think that was like 2008 that I was looking at that. So it's been a while. But yeah, so I am excited for
Almost,
the Texas.
almost want
I
to
am
say,
excited for the Texas game because I do think I don't know if excited is the right word because I actually think Texas is probably going to win that game, and it's just the thing is about Vanderbilt, and this was kind of exposed in this game. If they can't run the ball, they really can't do anything. Like you were saying, they got to run the ball to pass the ball. If you force them to throw the ball, that's not their game. And Texas
I think it's
could
just more so
probably,
like the weapons that Pavia has to work with, not necessarily Pavia himself.
yeah, I
He's got a
mean,
really
for
good
sure,
tight end, really good tight end.
yeah. Okay, let's just open this up in general now to other games that we watched and saw. I think maybe the first one we have to start with is probably Alabama, South Carolina, just because, South Carolina nearly had this game won. It was you it looked like we were about to have some crazy upsets, South
Oh yeah,
Carolina beating Alabama and then Mississippi State beating Texas. And then what can I say? That's what bad teams do. They cannot finish. South Carolina, I mean, they really had this one. They had a bad fumble at the end of the game. Bama was kind of classic letdown spot. Bama was kind of due for one of these coming off their schedule and now at South Carolina, a team that really wants to get a win at this point. And anytime a team faces Bama, you're going to get their best shot. And look, South Carolina, they moved the ball fairly well on them. And this was the first game. I've been wondering this if Alabama's one dimensional play style was going to cost them. And that's kind of what was happening because Simpson was not great this game. He was having trouble hitting his receivers, missing some open guys. It was maybe one of the worst games I've seen from him this
he only
season.
had 26 rush. Their running back only had 26 rushing yards, so
Exactly.
he literally couldn't do anything. Or
Yeah.
yeah, they could not run the ball at all. Excuse me.
Yes, and that's a problem. I wonder. It may not matter because Bama's Bama, but at some point, I wonder if that's going to really cost them. But give credit to Bama; they survived. They pulled it off. They didn't give up. And what can I say? South Carolina is not talked about enough for being one of the more disappointing teams in all of college football. Don't forget, they were ranked, I think it was 11th to start the year, and everyone was talking about them. And
And
they just
Lenore
got,
Sellers as I believe, the number one quarterback.
yeah, yeah. They can't get it done. And yeah, I was kind of excited to see it. And I was like, oh, South Carolina's going to get this done. And then they just couldn't pull it off. So yeah, that's my
I think you
thoughts.
got to give some credit to Alabama, Kalen DeBoer as well, just because it was a crunch time. They came back and won.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm really curious what South Carolina going to do with Shane Beamer. I'm really curious because I think that is a hard place because it's like, yes, players want to go to the SEC, but where's South Carolina at? And I thought he had a really good season. I know they went 8-4 last year, but I believe Lenore Sellers is a true sophomore this year. But so it would have been a freshman, true freshman last year. Listen, I think the guy's a good coach. South Carolina is just going to be a hard school to kind of get some like just all around talent. You can maybe get a 5-star here or there every couple of years, but just to be able to have a good, consistent recruiting class that's going to propel you to that next level, I think it's going to be extremely hard. And honestly, I think it's going to be a little bit of a shame because how much can the guy accomplish there? I don't know. To be honest with you, maybe that 8-4 season is about the best as he can do there. And I don't say that in a bad way because I think South Carolina is it the worst job in the SEC? No, but it's probably towards the bottom half, um, if I'm thinking correctly off the top of my head.
Oh
But
yeah, for sure it is.
I mean, I would hate for that guy to not get another chance at head coaching. I'm sure he would, but um, anyway, I mean, it was good. It was a good game. I think that was also on at 2:30, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think
Unfortunately,
3:15. But
yeah, yeah, 3:15.
these bottom half of the SEC jobs, I think you kind of got to give these guys an extended period of time
Oh, for
because
sure.
if you are going to get recruits, like one of the things that they're probably going to be looking for is stability because they don't want to have to play for a new coach every year. And South Carolina just isn't going to turn into even an LSU or a Georgia. That's not going to be them. Also, to their credit, or to put things in perspective, they do have one of the tougher schedules in the SEC this year. I imagine it won't be this bad every year. And look, they still need to be better than this, but because they've looked bad since game one. But let me just run through this really quick. They hosted Vanderbilt, and we see what they are now. At Missouri, hosted Kentucky. They won that game versus Kentucky. At LSU, host Oklahoma, host Alabama, at Ole Miss, at A&M, and then host Clemson at the end of the year. I mean, that's a pretty rough stretch of games.
Yeah, it is.
So you got to put that in perspective as well.
Yeah, you do because I mean, literally the majority of those teams are like pretty decent and ranked.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. What is there another game that you kind of catches your eye, team you want to talk about?
I would maybe just like to give Haynes King a little shout out. The Georgia Tech Syracuse game, first time Georgia Tech's been 8-0, and I forgot how many years it was. It was kind of crazy. They're getting a lot of first time things happening for the football program there this year, and honestly, that's pretty cool. Obviously, because Haynes King is from where we live. Haynes King had another great game, throwing over 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 91 rushing yards. Um, whenever they start really coming out with the Heisman odds and whatnot, he's got to be up there at the top. Um, Good win for them. Um, Briefly, I thought the Virginia North Carolina game was interesting. Bill Belichick making it
So
like,
close.
yeah, it was so close. I think Virginia has been in 3 overtime games, which is like, I don't know if it was the most in just the ACC or the country, but they've 3 overtime games in 8 games. Talking about heart attacks every Saturday, I already say that with Texas, and we've been in what I guess two. So just one game behind them. I know you were wanting to talk about the South Florida Memphis game. I don't know how
Well, now
much.
hang on. You're really going ahead of me here. I want to jump back to Georgia Tech real quick.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
and Haynes King, yeah, I think he's not getting enough attention for
Yeah,
Heisman. I
yeah.
mean, in a year where you're not, there is still no clear Heisman favorite other than maybe Mendoza at this point, and I think maybe that's the next team I want to get to. But is I mean, Haynes
I'd
King's been
almost have
awesome,
to between the two of them though. I'd almost have to give Haynes King the nod because
and
Mendoza's good as a passer, yes, and he's probably okay as a runner. But I mean, just Haynes King is. I mean, the dude's averaging almost 100 yards and like close to 100 yards on the ground every game, and at least 200 passing. And I mean, the guy's the entire team, and they're undefeated. So, and what's going to suck though is just how like if Georgia Tech loses a game, how will that affect his Heisman chance? Just
well, he'll
because
probably be done.
do it.
He'll probably be done. He won't be in the race anymore if
But
they lose.
but see, that's I think
I agree.
that's I think that's so ridiculous because in his circumstance, he's literally the entire team. You know,
Yep.
I know he's not out there on defense, but man, just sometimes what you can do on offense directly affects how your defense plays, and like just the amount of belief he instills on the team. It's just insane. Listen, the only game that they have left that I'm like, okay, that could be a little, or like maybe chalk that up as a loss, but that would be an interesting game. The Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech's
Yeah.
got go ahead.
No, I agree.
Yeah, because the next game they play at North Carolina State, at Boston College, Pitt, and then Georgia. And sometimes all three of those schools can be sneaky in the ACC. Like I think Georgia Tech will do fine against them. So, but every once in a while, North Carolina State will have an upset, Boston College will have an upset, and Pitt will too. So I'd be surprised if Georgia Tech lost, but hey, crazier things have happened. Now,
Pitt,
if Do what?
Well, Pitt has been playing well. So,
Yeah.
and that's the game before Georgia. So
Yeah.
I'd watch out for that game. But Georgia Tech knows they need to run the table to be in the ACC championship and really to make the playoffs. I am telling you right now, I don't. No one should be overlooking that Georgia Tech Georgia game. I think that's going to
Oh
be
yeah.
because Georgia's not flawless by any means.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
don't
wouldn't
forget
that
the
be
game.
kind of a crazy? That'd be like, I mean, this is obviously heading towards a historical season for Georgia Tech already, but just to be able to, I don't want to say dethrone, but be able to beat Kirby Smart, because literally, it's like little brother and versus big brother kind of thing, right? And uh, I don't know. I mean, it'd be pretty remarkable because it's like Georgia has everything and then some, whereas Georgia Tech doesn't. It's like they got to kind of fill in the pieces the best they can. So anyway, discredit to them for sure.
Agreed. And then quickly on the North Carolina thing, hated it for Bill. I mean, just so close to winning that game. Would have been so massive for him and the program, being what has been said about them. I see them making progress every week. They're still not very good, but just I really hate it for them. But whatever. I don't have much to say on that. I think the next place you were going to go was South Florida, Memphis. That was a great game. What was it, 31-17 at one point, and Memphis comes back. Memphis, man, they just had this random loss to UAB of all schools last week. And if it wasn't for that and they win this game, they're undefeated in prime position. Now there's a few teams that could be that group of five team between still South Florida, who I still think is very good, Memphis, and now Navy, who is undefeated. Navy faces Notre Dame next.
And that'd be
And
very interesting.
yeah, yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, but credit to Memphis for not quitting. And they now have some pretty good wins. I still consider that Arkansas win good, beating South Florida, good win. So, and then they'll have the American Championship. So credit to Memphis. And I don't know if you have anything on that game specifically.
No, not in particular. Yeah, not in particular. I guess something that we could briefly go over is the Houston Arizona State game. Houston
Mhm.
defeating Arizona State 24-16, especially off who did Arizona State play last weekend? It just left my
Texas
mind.
Tech, they just beat them.
Yeah, Texas Tech coming off a huge win. And maybe that's what it was. They were just still thinking about last weekend's huge win for them, and uh, Houston came in. Which Houston, by the way, 7-1 now. Connor Wegman playing pretty decent, to be honest. Like he actually led the game in rushing yards for Houston, 111, threw for 201 and a touchdown pass. So Houston's kind of another team to watch in the Big 12 for sure. So you've got there's like three, right? So you've got Tech, BYU, Houston, and you were kind of thinking Arizona State, but
Cincinnati.
yeah, Cincinnati too. So anyway, it's interesting. You've got one team that's 8-0, BYU. Then the next three teams are 7-1. Cincinnati being 5-0 in conference, so they're number two in the conference. Tech being at three. So listen, I think it's just going to be chaotic. I think that's the only reason why, in my opinion, the Big 12 is as interesting. Because really, out of all those teams, how many could really go compete for a championship? I don't really know yet. Everyone
One.
was really one. Okay,
If they
and
actually compete, probably Tech at their best.
yeah.
Because don't forget,
Uh,
their only loss was when they did have the backup quarterback.
yeah, that's true. And who played actually pretty decent too. So Tech in 2 weeks will play BYU. Okay.
Yep.
So that will be an interesting game. I know Tech is like 3 or 4, but for all intents and purposes, two top teams in the Big 12 will be playing against each other. Okay, and next week they play against Kansas State, which can be a sneaky game. Listen, I don't really think too highly of Kansas State, but they just beat the crap out of Kansas. Which I think that Kansas is like a great team by any means? No, not necessarily, but I did not expect that to happen. So I don't know. It could be a little sneaky game for Tech. I don't know.
I think another team you have to shout out is Iowa, and they
Hmm.
have a big game coming up in 2 weeks, hosting Oregon. Iowa, their quarterback Gronowski, I believe is his last name. The first few weeks of the season looked like really bad, and people on social media just like trashing him, saying like he may actually be the worst quarterback they've ever seen. And give credit to Iowa because they have somehow completely turned it around. They've blown out now two opponents in a row, Wisconsin and Minnesota. They beat Minnesota 41-3. I saw Minnesota last week play against Nebraska, beat Nebraska, who, by the way, Nebraska had a good win this past week. And I tell you what, that game now at Iowa, especially if it's a night game, kind of like you were mentioning earlier, that is going to be a fun game to watch because we haven't seen Oregon kind of in a prime time game in a while since the Indiana game. There's still kind of like a little bit to learn about Oregon, I feel like. And that's the next time we're going to see Oregon in that situation. So credit to Iowa, they look legit. We're still looking to see who that fourth team in the Big Ten is going to be. And I want to say like a lot of these teams at the top kind of face each other in the last few weeks of the season for the Big Ten. Like I want to say Iowa faces so they face Oregon, and then I'm trying to pull up their schedule here. So yeah, they've got Oregon at USC, and then to end the season at Nebraska, and all of those teams are kind of in the running for that fourth spot.
On the flip
So
side of that,
be
like
best
I would like to say Oregon. Okay, who is their best win right now?
Penn State.
Exactly. What does that tell you?
I get what you're saying, and I've heard Josh Pate talk about this. I hear you on that, and you absolutely have to take that into consideration. But if Penn State finds a way to win that game, they're not sitting here at 3-4 right now. You have to kind of give credit to Oregon for doing that to Penn State.
Listen, I think it was a great
Took the line.
environment, right? It was at Penn State. It
Oh
was a
yeah,
night game, whiteout game. So no discredit to Oregon, but kind of almost like you were saying about OU, like they were exposed as frauds. I don't think Oregon has been put to the test necessarily like some of the other teams have. Now they lost against Indiana, okay, which I feel like a lot of teams would have lost. But who else does Oregon have to play? Like at Iowa, I think that's going to be very interesting. I hope it's a night game. Okay, USC, that could be an interesting game as well. And then at Washington, that could be an interesting game. Okay, so as far as the Big Ten goes, I think they maybe have gotten. I'm trying to think how I would rate their schedule. I still think, like you said, there's a lot to be learned from Oregon. I just don't know if they have literally had their feet to the fire yet to really test them and kind of see what their deficiencies are, to be honest with you.
I agree. I agree with that.
That's not me saying like I don't think that they're a top five team or worthy to be a top five team because at the end of the day they're 7-1. Their lone loss being against number two or Indiana. So I
Mhm.
think I think what will be interesting is at Iowa because Iowa's 6-2. If Iowa were to win against Oregon, right, they're going to be a top 25 team. Iowa is sitting in fifth place or excuse me, fourth place in the Big Ten. If they were to beat Oregon this upcoming week, that would propel them to being third, being third in the Big Ten. And I don't know. Let me go look at Iowa's schedule. I think it could be. Let me go look here real quick. I'm kind of curious to see now. Iowa, they play Oregon at home, at USC, like you said, Michigan State, Nebraska. Um, I don't know. Big Ten could be kind of an interesting conference as well.
For sure, for sure. That's going to be exciting to watch over the next few weeks. So let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about. Just quickly, BYU had every opportunity to lose that game to Iowa State, and they came back. Got to give them credit. I still don't know how good they are, but at this point, they're good because they're undefeated. They've beaten teams now that were supposed to beat them. They're coming off a big emotional win against Utah, a game that they were supposed to lose, and now facing Iowa State off a bye to win that game. Credit to BYU. I think their schedule is still pretty tough. Like they've got Tech and they're still going to have an opportunity to prove they're that good. But at Tech, at Cincinnati remaining, and yeah, give them credit. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. So, and that
So
was a fun game.
I just got a notification on my phone. Headline: LSU discussing Kelly's future. University execs having talks on head coach's potential departure and buyout. So yeah, it's not looking good for Brian Kelly because there's still 4 to 5 games left. I mean, if they're already discussing it, it's like, okay, how much of a leash does Brian Kelly have, even if he does stay there? Because if, like, let's say theoretically he stays there for the next year and they lose like a game maybe they shouldn't have, is he already done, or what's the deal going to be? So that's not looking good for him, or honestly the university. Because how long
Well,
or how far back does this set LSU? Because whoever they hire, they're it's not going to be like an overnight success story. I mean, maybe. Okay, I don't want to say never, but more than likely, it's going to take you 2 years to get back to, okay, all right, this is at least a 10-win team or whatever, 2 to 3.
yeah, I would expect, and this is kind of what everyone's reporting, there to be changes, but it may not be at the head coach spot. Like they may do something with the offensive coordinator,
Coordinators.
all that. But also, like, what does LSU know? Like in terms of like their boosters, like do they think, you know what? No, we have good connections with Lane Kiffin. That's the guy we want. And if we're gonna do it, we need to do it this year, or else Florida's gonna grab him. So I wonder if that like goes into their thinking at all. So I asked you if you'd be surprised if Lane Kiffin leaves. What do you think's going to happen right now if you had to bet it one way or the other? You think they're going to fire Brian Kelly or does he stay?
I'll probably say firing because, I mean, up to this point, what has LSU done? I mean, I think the best victory he's had is against Alabama, like a couple years ago, like on that or I can't remember if it was an overtime win or not, but or I think it was just a last second play with Jane Daniels on the tight end. I think that probably firing because, like you said, just the combination of what has happened since he's been there, and just people just seem to not like him. Like he just doesn't fit in there. And I always, like, every time I think of Brian Kelly with LSU, I always think about that. Like, first thing, he was in the gymnasium and he had that fake Southern accent, So I don't know. And he's had some interesting like press conferences his entire, like, really and truly, like half this stuff that we've seen Brian Kelly do at LSU, he did not do up to this point. Like, you never really saw these weird press conferences from him, like at Cincinnati, at Notre Dame. You never really saw that. But then all of a sudden, it's almost like we're getting a different Brian Kelly here at LSU. I don't know. So
Well, there could just be more pressure at LSU, but I was leaning towards they're probably going to keep him just because that's what a lot of people are saying. But honestly, I think especially the way they lost last night probably changes things for them. I actually think they probably are going to fire him. And it's not just that he's losing, it's the way he's losing and just how much people around him seem to hate him.
well,
Like he's
here's the
almost got
question
to
I
have
think
an
is more so
undefeated
like,
season for
are
them
the
to.
LSU boosters, are they willing to set the school back 2 years in football potentially before having some real success potentially?
But they may think, well, if we don't do it now, technically we're setting it back 3 years if we do it next year. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. This is gonna be a fascinating storyline. Does that worry you as a Texas fan though? Because they may call Sark. I didn't think of that, but they might call Sark.
Listen, I think, depending on like where you grew up or whatever would factor that mainly. Okay, the one edge that I'll give LSU is definitely I guess you could say the fan base in the night games or whatever, but that's it. I don't think Sark would leave for LSU. I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Okay. All right. So we've been doing this now for an hour 15 minutes. I'm kind of done with what I want to say. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we signed off?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Blown Coverage. Caleb, I'll see you next time.
All right. See you.